Uh, Good evening, everybody. Thank you so much for coming. I'm really excited. My name is Lauren Zimmerman. I own the Writer's Block bookstore in Winter Park. We're actually opening up a brand new bookstore in Winter Garden in a couple weeks. So we've been spending our time getting ready for that. So there'll be a story there, bookstore opening during a pandemic. The world will tell us how it goes. And I am very, very excited to be introducing you to two authors. Today, I'm going to hold up their books. I have Richard Farrell, The Falling Woman, and I have Amy Jo Burns, Shiner. And they're both debut authors. I had the pleasure of reading Richard's book when it was first a manuscript, which has been a year now, I believe, and was able to provide a quote for the publisher, and that was all really exciting. And he made it to the Indie Introduced list. Amy, I don't know exactly how we were connected when we started working with Richard. I wanted to find another author to have so that they could have a conversation together. It's always a lot more fun watching two authors talk about their trade than having a bookseller ask a bunch of questions. And so Amy was suggested to me that she would be a good person for me to pair with Rich. Is it Rick? Is it Rick? You're muted, Rick.
I just saw that. Rich, you can just call me Rich. Rich is fine. Yeah.
Richie Rich. And so I got the book, read it, and loved it. And so there are not a whole lot of similarities. Maybe some similarities. I like they're both strong, independent women. They're both women that took themselves out of what is a difficult situation and drastically changed the course of their lives by their own actions, which was not something that would come freely. It's not what you would automatically think that somebody would do to change their life. So there is a lot of similarity there. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to ask Amy and Rich to just give us a little pitch about their book. I always call it the elevator pitch, to not go into too much detail, because I will ask some questions since I've read both books, and I will also be asking some fun questions just about their writing style and how they became writers and what they're working on now, and just really fun stuff that readers love to hear about. And also any questions, please, from y'all. I don't know if anybody has had the chance to read the books yet, but if you even had just questions about their writing style or where they're from or what they do, I'm sure they'd love to answer any of those questions. So but if you don't have questions and you just want to listen and learn about them, I've got plenty of questions to ask. So let's see, we'll start with Rich.
Well, Lauren, thanks for inviting me, and I'm really delighted to be here with Amy Jo and with Writer's Block. I am in San Diego, so it's only 3 p.m. here, but it looks dark in my little office cabin that I'm in. So the book is actually, the novel started for me as a short story. I came across this idea of, and it's happened 5 times, of these people who were in airplanes and something happened to the airplane and they get sucked out of the cabin at altitude and fell, and at least 5 times that I've been able to verify this has really happened, and these people have somehow survived, and I became sort of fascinated with this idea. 3 of them were in World War II, or it makes a lot of sense, but then this happened twice in the 70s. So I started trying to write this short story about this, and somewhere along the drafting of that, a mentor of mine reminded me of the James Dickey poem that's called Falling. And in that poem, he talks about a woman being sucked out of an airplane. And in the poem, the woman doesn't make it, but it became inspirational for me, just the way he described the language of the fall. And so I was just sort of processing, what would that be like? What would that do to you if you were to miraculously survive something like that? And then somewhere along the way, it became a story a little bit about the investigation and about what these things mean to these 2 characters, and what they would do. I don't know how much of an elevator pitch that is, but I will tell you, it didn't work as a short story. So hopefully the novel will give a little more.
No, it's great. Without, I'm just dying to spoil the heck out of it, because Like when I did my, the only thing I remember, I did a quote, and I should have pulled up before we started talking, but the first sentence was, imagine a woman on a plane, and the plane is crashing, and she literally falls out of the plane into a barn and survives. I mean, it's like, she didn't just
Sounds
like
ridiculous,
fall in a
yeah,
tree.
Right.
It sounds plausible, but what did I say? Plausible, but not possible, but not plausible.
No,
And because it is, and then the backstory of the whole thing. I mean, that's not even the arc of the story.
No.
I mean, that was just something that happened.
I just had to get her out of the plane.
Because then it would be a short story.
Right. It would have been much easier to do, right?
Yeah, it would have been 250 words, and it would have fit on one
Right.
page.
Right.
But because you could have done her backstory, put her on a plane, and then have her drop, and then
Right.
yeah. So okay, so Amy, tell us a little bit about your book.
Sure. So Shiner is the story of a 15-year-old girl named Wren, and she lives in the secluded mountains of West Virginia with her parents. She's lived a very private life, and her father became a local legend when he was young, and he got struck by lightning, and he becomes this snake-handling preacher. And when his daughter is 15, she witnesses her father perform this really strange miracle, and it goes horribly wrong. But what ends up happening is that all her family's secrets start to unravel as a result of it. So the story is told from three perspectives. One is Wren's, of course. The other is a lovelorn moonshiner named Flynn. And then the last is a sort of disenchanted housewife. And those three voices work together to tell the true story that's hiding behind this mountain legend. And, when I think about my book and Rich's, the plot is very different, but I think at the heart, both books are sort of about who has the right to tell someone's story and kind of who owns the story. So I think that there's some interesting crossover in our books that way.
No, absolutely. It's a really good way. Much better elevator pitch too. Wow, that was really good, Amy Jo. I'm impressed.
And it's funny, so like I guess maybe 25 or 30 pages into it, I figured out what the name meant. Shiner, moonshiner.
Right.
So he's a moonshiner.
Mm-hmm.
So, which back during this time period, it could either be a normal profession that is carried through generations and not necessarily looked poor upon. But then again, it is something that's illegal. And so that was pretty interesting about being a moonshiner, about all that. So, Amy, so how did you come up with this idea?
Well, I think when I started the story, I really wanted to write a book about what it feels like to be misunderstood and how that changes a trajectory of a life. And so in the book, the women of the novel feel deeply misunderstood by all the people surrounding them, but it kind of causes them to have this longing for the outside world. But for the men, in particular, the snake handling preacher, he feels misunderstood, but it kind of leads him to bet on the myth of himself, and it puts his family in danger. And I think, this story has been growing in me since I was young. I grew up in Northern Appalachia. I did not attend a snake handling church, but I did attend a faith healing church. And every book that I've read about that always just felt like very from the outside in. And I wanted to really write about what it's like to kind of grow up within that and sort of like crack out of it or break out of it, but in a way that everything that was beautiful about that very strange and very weird way of life sort of stays with you. So as somebody who's from Appalachia, that area of the country is often kind of just lampooned for being, poverty stricken and, ill educated and that kind of thing. And I wanted to write about people who live complicated and rich lives and have dreams and faults and sorrows and all of that. And I just wanted all of that in the mix while also taking those stereotypes and sort of saying, like, let's peel that back to see what's really there behind it and where it came from. Yeah.
So what also is really interesting about this book is there's a love story,
Mm-hmm.
and it's between two women, but it's not like the love story in terms of like a love story between two, a man and a woman, or a love story between same sex. In that terms, it was about a deep, deep friendship between two women that where they were really devoted to each other and made life choices for each other.
Mm-hmm.
And that to me was a story as well. And it was like it was almost like a separate story for me. How did you come up with that idea?
I think actually that their friendship, that probably took the longest time to develop over the course of writing the book, because I think I had to grow as a person, as I was sorting through all these things. When I started the book, I was younger, I didn't have any kids, and then as I grew up writing this book, I did have my own kids. And so there was part of, I think, me living through some life experience that allowed me to sort of say, like, what would somebody like Ruby, who is the preacher's wife and she's Ren's mother, what would she really need to survive? And like, what would make her feel like she couldn't leave home? And I think that so often comes down to those friendships, because I know that's how I felt when I left home. I felt like I was abandoning my best friends. And but I think like what writing the novel taught me about that friendship is that everybody on the mountain is sort of looking for some kind of stability, and you think it should come from this preacher who's very powerful and does all these things and hears from God, but that's not the miracle in the book. The miracle is the way that these women love each other and sacrifice for each other. And I hope over the course of the novel that their friendship becomes this really subtle but powerful act of resistance about who has power on the mountain. And I hope ultimately for Ren, the 15-year-old narrator, that's where she gathers strength. And that's where she learns what it means to be a woman, is seeing how these women care for each other in a community that's not designed for their health or their welfare.
Yeah, and and their friendship is so equal. It's just so equal, and I could tell by reading it that's how they could survive. And I don't want to spoil anything, and so I'm going to not say anything else. But I want to badly. But for the reader, I really encourage you to read this book and really learn about that relationship, because it really is a story within a story. Because Ren, the 15-year-old, she has a story, and she witnessed, and she was in a life that is the only life she knew. And for her to figure this whole thing out, and then at the end, how she deals with her father, and all that was very adult-like of her. I could see us as adults, in our 50s and 60s, having reconciled the same way, and to have seen in a period of 300 pages go from a 50-year-old to how maybe I would resolve my relationship. It's accepting them for who they are, like this is this person, this is who he is, and that's just, and and the world spins, and and that's a very mature thing to have. So I think I know that the readers love it. I mean, I'm sure that the reader will love it. So Rick, so is this was your debut. This started out as a short story, and so where did you how long did it take you to write it? Was this like a commitment that you did part-time while you were working doing something else, or was it something that you were able to kind of put together fairly quickly?
Not quickly at all, but I went, I used to be, it was a pilot for when I was younger. And so flying was a big part of my life up until I was about 23, and I had a seizure. I was in military training, and I had a seizure in the airplane, and I couldn't fly anymore. So like my sort of life trajectory changed really abruptly at a young age. And I didn't know what I wanted to do. I kind of did some weird jobs and ended up as a high school teacher, as a high school science teacher, and I didn't love it. I mean, I did it, but I didn't love it. And my wife was a military physician, so she was stationed overseas, and I went overseas with her to Spain. We had 2 kids, and I was trying to write a book, and it wasn't going so well. I couldn't work, so I had time, and then I ended up going back to a MFA program in Vermont, and kind of drank the Kool-Aid and became really, really mesmerized by learning about writing and by really practicing my craft. And when we came back from Spain, I basically negotiated. I negotiated 2 years, thinking, oh yeah, I can rip out a book in 2 years. And 2 years turned into, I think it's been 10 now. So I do this full time. I teach and I write full time, and I'm Mr. Mom the rest of the time. So that was kind of my negotiated settlement.
I want to apologize for changing your name because I keep saying
I've called many things.
Rick, it's like
I answer to most things, Lauren.
I have
it's
unilaterally
okay.
decided that your name is changing. So even
fine.
if I
call me Larry and I'd answer to it.
Okay, Larry.
I was going to say one thing about Amy Jo's book, because when I was reading it, one of my favorite books I've read in a long time was Dennis Lehane's Mystic River, which I grew up in Boston. I grew up outside of Boston, and boy, there's those codes and those intrinsic loyalties that happen in those kind of communities. So I just before I forget, I wanted to say that it reminded me in a strange way that's not an obvious connection, but like, oh, it reminds me of Mystic River in some ways too, which is high praise. So just wanted to say
Thank you. No, I mean, I love that book. So thank you.
I don't think I read it, but I think it's the one they turned into a movie.
Yes.
Okay.
So much better than the movie. The movie's
So
great.
I'm sure it's so much better. But I just remember the name.
Yeah.
So, Rich, how can we talk about her without spoiling it too much? Can we give a little bit of information about what's going on with her? Like, why is she on this plane? I guess maybe that's a good start.
Yeah. So I tend to geek out with the craft, so I don't want to get too crafty. So stop me if I think too much like a writer and try to talk about the book. I needed this character to have a problem, not to get her on a plane, but to make her make the choices she makes in the book. It couldn't just be a simple case as she just wants to disappear, because what happens is after the woman falls out of the airplane and she's discovered possibly a survivor of this crash, part of my thinking was, how would the world today react to this? The last time this happened was in the early 70s, and we didn't live in the same age. And I'm thinking of this woman would get all this attention, all this crush of celebrity attention, and I wanted her to have a really compelling reason not to want to be a part of that, to just want to reject that, to want to be on her own, which is I think how I would feel in some ways. So I had to think of a problem she could have, and the problem, unfortunately, was she had terminal cancer. But she had been given like a reprieve. She'd been given like a plateau. And so she had some time, and then this crazy thing happens to her. So it really kind of beat her up pretty bad. Like they say, I think it was Flannery O'Connor said the writer's job is to put a character in a tree and throw rocks at them. So I threw a lot of rocks at this poor woman early on. But part of that was to give her the strength and independence to do what she needed to do, which was a really, it's an unusual choice she makes, not to go home, not to go back to her family. And I know it is rankled some book club readers, but there's been other people who've said to me that's that especially for moms, sometimes they need a little. I mean, I was a stay-at-home dad, so I get it too, but like you need do I have to go back and do the same thing I've been doing? Do I ever get to be free of this? So part of it for me was her quest for freedom to live her own life on her own terms. And one of the things I found is that some of the objection that why would a mom do this? And I always say, what if a man did it? You might not have that same objection. So why is the standard different? Men do spiritual quests all the time and no one complains, but if a woman does it, oh, that's a violation. So that was, I don't want to get controversial with it, but for me that was a tough hurdle to overcome as a writer. Is like, can I give this woman permission to do what feels right?
See, as a reader, and I took it differently. My perception was, if I were put into that situation, it's almost selfless, because, and you did a really, really good job of how she kind of evolved into being okay with this decision. Like at the end of the day, you've got to live with, even if you're dying, you've got to live with the decisions that you're making. That there are these people at home that love you and that want to be around you, and you've got to make these tough decisions. And could it be just selfish that just leave me alone and let me just crawl into a corner and die, or do I in some strange way, do I have their best interest at hand?
Right.
And she talked about that a few times,
Right.
that maybe her decision was also, and I'm going to stop that sentence because it could be a spoiler, because the book, it spends a lot of time in her thoughts, she goes to this small town and the people really embrace her and surround her and protect her. And so she has a lot of opportunities to share with the reader and her new friends and her new family and the new people that are going to protect her, what's going on, and the inspector or whatever. And so we're not just reading her thoughts, we're also kind of watching her, figure this whole thing out. And that, it really was, in her mind, the best decision that she could make, whether it was, whether we could argue all day long, whether it was or wasn't. And so, that's why I love that book so much. When you're a debut author, and they do, the American Booksellers does the indie introduce, and they read the books and everything. And we read a lot, and we have to defend the ones that we want. And so that's why I get to call you, because I was one of the defenders, that's
Well,
like, they let the person that defended it,
Yeah. Well, I'm very grateful, Lauren. So thank you for,
just falling out of a plane, and surviving. And then, and I love Amy's book. And I just, we were talking about it before, that even that we're trying something new with and those of you in the audience, I hope that this new normal of virtual events with authors, that it's taken on a different meaning for you, and that you'll support the authors, go to the library, read the book, or go buy the book, or digital book, or whatever is or share it with a friend, or however, because I know that at the end of the day, the authors, they just want people to read the book, however they got the book. And so what we want to do is to create an opportunity for readers to see these talks on demand. So we will have this on our website, and we will promote it. So for those of you that are listening, I encourage you to do the same thing for other authors in other cities, wherever you might be. I know Politics and Prose has a really good page where they have all the listed, their previous, virtual events that they do. And I think more and more bookstores and authors and YouTube pages and everything else, so just, spend an afternoon listening to some of these and meeting some authors, and, and after you meet them, go to the library, pick up the book or borrow it, or, so that's our goal here, is to, to let these, because, you guys are in cities that I would have never been able to, have you come and meet with us locally. So I think there is some great things. So I'm gonna ask a few questions, some fun questions. Okay, we'll start with Amy. So how many unpublished or half-published books do you have? How many books have you started that you didn't finish?
There's one that is finished that is not very good. That was like the first one that I wrote. It's called Water is a Woman. I wrote it ages ago, but it was one of those ones I wrote that was like, I remember this feeling, it was like, if this isn't the book, I'll never write again, thank goodness that wasn't the case. Let me see. And what I actually have a lot of that's not finished is essays, like personal essays, because I think a lot of the way that my fiction works is that I'm kind of wrestling with something that has happened to me, or something personal that is true. So I have a lot of material that hasn't kind of coalesced in a useful way into an essay, that I end up being like, I think it would actually be easier to write a 300-page novel than try to squeeze this into, a 10-page essay. So I have at least 20 unfinished essays of stuff.
So, yeah, and then maybe one day the unfinished essay will wake up in the middle of the night and it'll become a novel. It'll become a character in a novel. So I'm going to ask both of you, like, what is your writing process? Do you like to just dump out all your thoughts on a page and then kind of do a lot of editing, or do you like to outline or create characters first? What is have you created a method for yourself on how you write? Amy, I'll let you start.
Okay. Oops,
Yeah.
sorry.
Amy can start and then we'll
Sure.
ask.
I go in without a plan, and it is frustrating and wonderful, and I couldn't change it if I might change it if I could, but it's not the way my brain works. When I want to start a new project, I get a notebook, I write the first draft by hand, but I mean, it's barely sentences, it's images, it's ideas, it's not in order, and it's a mess. And I just let myself take as long as I want to take with that, fill up a couple notebooks. And then if I feel like there's something there that, might turn into an entertaining read, then at that point, I'll get out my laptop and try to write sort of what I think is a synopsis and then go from that. But my books take forever to write just because like I said, I don't have a plan. It's like very organic, and I have to throw out, more pages than I end up keeping, but it teaches me something always.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it's it's
Well,
fun
I guess in a way it could be a good cure for writer's block, because if you give yourself permission to just sit down and just write a conscious stream of consciousness, and if it's just like 2 pages of just one sentence that went on for 2 pages, you're kind of allowing yourself to just write during writer's block almost.
Yep. Absolutely.
So so Rich.
Similar.
Sorry,
I mean,
you'll
similar.
always be. You can
call
Rich
me
to
anything. Call me Larry. I mean, that's fine.
How do you do it?
Yeah, my process is somewhat similar to Amy Jo's. That I kind of, it's a mess for a long, long time, and then with this book in particular, I had a 3-week writing residency in a really cool place outside of Chicago. So I had 3 weeks to sort of grind on it, and I worked really hard for those 3 weeks. And I'm like, oh, I've got a good draft. And then I came back and I had like 6 months to get it to my agent, and it was such a mess. It was so messy. So I did do an outline at that point. Like I did like a 2-week kind of mad dash outline after I'd written. This was like the 3rd draft. And I never used the outline, but the outline did help me. It kind of gave me a structure that I was lacking, in those early messier drafts. But the one I'm working on now is a little bit more linear. Mm-hmm. And so it isn't good yet, but it doesn't feel as cumbersome in terms of the structure. But it's still messy. It's still a strange process.
So if you say linear, like, do you start with like an outline, like do you know in the beginning that you've got 5 characters, or do you even know like who the protagonist or who the person is? Like, did you know about the inspector when you started writing, in the beginning of,
in fact, the falling woman was a man for a long time, and then the inspector was someone else, and then for a while the inspector's boss, that guy Dickie Gray, he was the guy who fell, because I thought his name was cool, and so it was Dickie Gray was falling out of the airplane, and then it became a woman, and then the inspector became a rookie, and for a while he was a more experienced. So there was a lot of that movement, points of view changed a bunch of times, and it's the same thing with the book I'm working on now. It's starting to come together, I think, knock on wood, but it was very different. It started as a short story, and it's kind of sprawled, and new characters show up, and it's really weird. The process is very weird and mysterious.
Yeah,
not mysterious, but it's
it's weird. Well, I think what it does is it kind of gives you both permission. That's really cool that you both have the same styles, because I've interviewed authors where their outlines turn into the book. The outline is 300 pages, and they turn the 300-page outline into a 700-page or word or whatever book. But it almost like gives you guys permission to just have fun with it, like no pressure, because it's like when you have an outline, there's always structure that you've got to deal with, and it's almost difference between doing a drawing versus a CAD using a computer aided design to do graphics, instead of maybe the free flow is so much more fun in the beginning, and then it turns into that's when you start using the computer aided graphics tools that allow you to kind of make that person look what they look like or whatever. So that's kind of cool. It's nice that you give yourself permission to do that. So
It's a nice way of putting it, right, Amy Jo? Is we give ourselves permission. That's how it feels, right?
well, it just seems to
I
me
should
like,
right, crawl under my desk when things get bad. That would be more
and then,
accurate. But
and when
that's
you're,
okay.
and then what you're doing is you're rocking yourself saying, it's okay, it's okay,
Yeah,
it's okay, right? You know, and that's like
Well,
giving
you
yourself
know,
permission.
I had a really wonderful writing teacher and mentor who told me that if you push yourself out of ambiguity too soon, then your project will fall apart. So the longer that you are able to stay in that space of, I don't know what the heck I'm writing, the better the end will be. So if you can withstand that middle where you feel like, you know what, I might fail big with this, there's a huge payout on the other side of that.
That's
So,
great.
yeah.
Right. Right. And, you know, because you have to like I was saying, you have to make a conscious decision to give yourself permission to do it, because, you know, because if you feel the pressure, you're going to go straight to the outline, you know.
Right.
And so if you were to ask Rick, if you could time travel into any time period, future or past or present, who would you want to sit down and have coffee with or lunch with?
This is a really nerdy answer, but I was not a great student. You know, I was a good student, but I wasn't a great reader when I was in school, and I sort of fell in love with reading after I left the military. And I was a massive Dostoevsky fan. And a few years ago, I was in St. Petersburg, and this is what I chose to do in my visit to St. Petersburg. And I chose to go to the Artist Cemetery, and I actually got to stand near his gravesite. And it was a really strange feeling, like, just because this is this person that was this mythical writer figure in my life, and it didn't seem real. And then there I was, and there's his actual grave. It was weird. So I think I would love to have coffee with him if I could go back into the 19th century St. Petersburg and sit down. I'd
Did
be
you
really
know
scared.
about his personality? Like,
Oh yeah,
just imagining.
Yeah, no. I mean, I read the Joseph Frank did this 5-volume biography of him that was incredible. So yeah, no, I was a real Dostoevsky, you know, Slavophile nut for a while before I started writing. I haven't read him. You know, I haven't read him since I started writing, and it's on my to-do list to go back and read some of those novels that affected me so much as a young reader, and see how I'd react to them now as a writer.
Yeah. So the next time you're crawling underneath the desk, rocking yourself, and
Notes from
just
the
pull the
undergrad.
book,
Right.
just grab the book and read a few pages.
Right.
So Amy, where would you like to go?
You know, I think, and I would probably answer this differently in any other season of life, but I think I would go back and try to have lunch with my grandparents before they got married in 1942, 43. My grandfather just passed away actually at the age of 99. He got COVID, unfortunately, and passed. And so I've been thinking a lot about his life and some of the choices he made. And I would love to go back and see he and my grandmother married, fell in love quickly before he had to leave for World War II. And I think I would love to meet them both before whatever happened in the World War that was just, you know, so terrible, and kind of changed the trajectory of both of their lives. Yeah, I think that's what I would do. I think it would be really powerful to see your grandparents as young people in love, and you know, kind of knowing what's, you know, knowing everything, the good and the bad that's coming.
You know, your biggest wish is always, you know, that we know them as children. We know them best when we're children, and you know, and you look back and think, what would it have been like to be their buddy? You know, like a friend, like somebody that you sat next to at church, and you just kind of knew each other and knew what they, because that's not the same person that you know, that as a grandchild, or as even for your own parents. So another question is, how did you break into the publishing world? So I know some people, you know, it's lucky, and sometimes it's, you know, you go the traditional route of getting an agent. Sometimes there are connections with the publishers and are lucky enough to get an editor to read it. How did you guys finally get able to get the attention of publishers? And I'll let Rich start.
Rick. I had finished a short story collection, and I shared it with a friend of mine who was an incredible mentor, and she, without asking me, she sent it to her agent, and I was like, that was one of the coolest days of my. She didn't tell me, and then she sent it to her agent, and the agent was a New York agent, and she called me. I almost crashed the car, and then she wanted to represent. First she's like, I can't represent short stories, and then she's like, well, I like these, I think I can, and then of course a month later she said, do you have a novel? And I went, kind of. I can, so I had to kind of shift gears. So the short story collection is done in a sense, but it's not published. It may never get published, who knows. But she wanted me to work on this novel. So I was with an agent working on the novel for about a year. I had been writing it, but I'd been working on it for about a year before I gave it to her. And then I was literally under my desk when she called me, because I thought she was going to hate it. And she called me in April, and I was an absolute disaster. And she said, I want to make some, edits over the summer, but I think we can go out with it in the fall. And it was cool. It was a really neat experience. I didn't expect any of that.
That's great. That's wonderful. So Amy, how did you get their attention?
So, well, my undergraduate degree was actually in like business and labor relations. So I worked in that after college and really didn't like it very much. And I'd always wanted to be a writer, and wrote that novel that wasn't very good. And my husband is from New York City. We ended up moving there for a little bit, and I applied to an MFA program. I still cannot. I got in by the skin of my teeth, I'm pretty sure. So that's kind of where I had a season of 2 years to write. And I wrote a memoir, actually. And, they say that one of the benefits of getting an MFA is that you get all these connections and people to introduce you to so-and-so. So I had hoped against hope that would happen, because I didn't know anything about the publishing industry. It didn't. There was just, nothing came together. So I decided to educate myself and, went through all the books and websites and tried to perfect a query letter. And I sent out so many query letters. If you're not familiar, it's an elevator pitch basically. And you're asking an agent if they might want to take a look at your manuscript. And, you send out 50, you maybe get 10 that respond saying they want to, maybe look at your manuscript. So that is a really, really challenging season.
Yeah.
Because you're trying to bet on yourself, even in the face of people saying no. So I think it probably took 9 months of that. But what had happened kind of in the middle is there was an agent that I really liked who said, I'm interested in this project, but it's not done yet. So, and she gave me some feedback. And so I worked on it, and I kind of was like, I'm going to go through this process with her. And if she wants to sign me at the end, then it will have been worth it. And she did. So the whole thing probably took about 9 months. But if anybody's watching, I always tell people, it might help to have connections, but there's also there's something to be said for having to educate yourself in the way that a business works too. So there's many ways, there's many paths to get there.
And betting on yourself and thinking that, this is a good book. I think this is a good book. And, and having the agent give you that speck of encouragement saying, the whole, here's a quarter, call your mother and to pick you up. But it was more like, if you can, here's some feedback and you actually did it and then stayed in touch with her. So it's all about relationships too. And just showing her that you're willing to, to really do that. I think I think that if I could choose a profession, I would either want to be an author or a musician, because you can be anonymous most of the time, and you could, but it's equally as impossible to break into the business. And a lot of people don't understand how hard it is to be a writer and how hard it is to get published, or how long it takes. Because you could be the best writer and just get frustrated for the amount of time that it takes to the year and a half or 18 months it takes to even write it and to have someone look at it and edit it and put it on a schedule for publishing and printing and marketing. It's
And that's,
crazy.
that's always why I tell people there's a big difference between writing and publishing. And it is okay if you just like the writing piece, because publishing is a different animal. So I kind of feel like for me, writing is sort of like the rehab where you remind yourself of like, this is why I love this, I love to create and all those things. And then publishing is when you're kind of like, all right, let's get down to business,
Right,
so
right.
they're different
Yeah,
for sure.
right. So, so I'm going to ask a couple more questions, but I still want to encourage anybody that's listening or watching right now, if you have any questions, if you could, put them in the chat, because I'm going to keep asking questions. And so if anybody has any, just go ahead and put them in there, or you could wave your hand since there's a few of us if you wanted to ask in person. Okay, so Rich, if your novel was made into a movie, who would you see as playing the female role?
That's not fair.
Have you thought about it?
That's not fair. That's not a fair.
You have tell
no,
me you thought about
of course I thought about it. Of course I thought about it.
I want to know.
I want to know. I want to know.
The person who I always saw in that role was like Julianne Moore. She's a complex enough actress that she could pull off both the soft part of the character and then the tough part of the character. So I always imagined her as the, because she just felt she's kind of badass, but she's also kind of soft, if that makes sense. Like she's at both sides of her personality, which I love.
Yeah, that's a good choice. Yeah. Well, how about you, Amy? Which one would be your who would play your main
let
character?
me see. I change my mind about this all the time, but when I was writing the book, Briar, who is I guess you could call him the antagonist in the book, but he's the preacher who takes up serpents. I always saw him as Michael Fassbender, because I feel like Michael Fassbender could really sell, why somebody is so magnetic but so dangerous at the same time. Because you kind of need to not be able to fully write this dude off, And then Ruby, right now, I would love to see Rooney Mara, I think, as Ruby. I think she'd do great.
I was thinking for Russell Crowe for the dad, because I think of him as older. That's how I'm seeing him. He might be younger because she's young, but he is charming. But you can play that part where you could just hate him like almost right away. And
I've had some readers tell me they think that Timothy Oliphant should be Flynn, the moon.
Oh yeah. I could see that. Yeah. So one last question that I'm going to ask for at 6:34. What has been one of your most rewarding experiences as an author? So I'll let Amy start with that. One of your most rewarding experience as an author.
I've had so many, and I don't mean to be cheesy, but I've had some really special interactions with readers that I cherish so much, like especially right now when it just feels like personal connection is so hard to get. So when someone takes the time to like read the book, get it at the library, whatever, and then send you a message about, and it's anything, I've gotten messages from people who say, I grew up in West Virginia and, you really got it right. Or people who say, I never knew anything about this life, but this story just meant something to me. And I felt a little less lonely reading it. Yeah. There's nothing like that feeling. Because for me, I'm a reader first before writer, before anything else. So I know how much books have kept me such good company. So to know that something I wrote did that for somebody else, is that there's nothing better than that.
Yeah. Yeah. I know that's the best, because you write it and it's out there and you don't know who's read it or what, how they're going to react, and to get positive. Like I used to, when I first opened the bookstore, I would write letters to the authors and tell them how much I loved the book. And I would send it to the rep and say, could you get this to the author? And I was shocked that the authors loved it. I mean, they would write me back. Oh my God. It's like, I think my first one was to like Diane Chamberlain, that book, the something daughter, now I can't remember. And I just wrote her this letter, and she wrote back, and I'm going, oh my God, she wrote back, and it's like, you didn't expect it. But so, okay. So Rich, what experience has been the most exciting thing that's happened during this?
So I could echo what Amy just said. It is really a rush when you'll get a note from someone. I've been finding out on social media a lot. Like you'll get a note from someone you haven't heard from in years, and they read. It's first off, it's amazing they're reading the book. Like that's still it's still a strange moment. But I'm going to give you just a slightly different answer because it was such a cool experience. Is that at some point my book went out to a copy editor. They told me that the main editor and that they had done their thing at Algonquin, and then they sent it out to a copy editor, and she was incredible.
Oh.
Like she read this book in a way that made me feel like this is why you invest time and you invest energy into understand it. She was so detailed. She found a missing day. So after this book had been, vetted and edited and all, and she did this incredible timeline. I kept all of her edits just to have this. I show it to my students sometime. I'm like, and she saw it. And at one point she's like, I think you're missing a day here. I'm like, I was missing a day, but she was such a detailed reader. And I actually had lunch with her in San Diego about a year after that. And it was just this really neat experience to say, these are what good readers do. This is why writers spend so much time doing this, is because there are readers like that out there that read carefully. And I think that was a really impressive thing, just to know that there's still people out there that take this work as seriously as booksellers do it and writers do it. And there are these people that are readers that do it. And that was really humbling and very, very powerful for me.
Yeah.
Yeah. I always, that's my dream job. I would love to be an editor and I'm terrible at movies. I'm terrible at books because I can never truly enjoy it because I'm so busy trying to figure out, is there, how it's where the placement is and how it's placed. And, I don't look at grammar. I just kind of look at arcs and I look at, what is the, author thinking. And I'm, I can't enjoy, I could sit in a movie theater and the whole time I'm just analyzing everything. And I love with books, I spend a lot of time. Like if there's a sentence that is what I think is a really great sentence, I'll think, oh my God, that's a really great sentence, right? And not even remembering. Okay, so here's the last question, and it kind of is a lead in to what you just said. And I always like this question. Do you hide secrets in your book that only few people will find? Have you ever done that? So we'll start with Rich. Did you hide anything?
Did I hide anything? There's things in the book that are, like you pull on your ear kind of messages that, that aren't, I don't know that I would call them secrets, but they're definitely things that are inside jokes, not jokes. And
someone reading it will recognize it.
Someone reading it would recognize, I would hope so, would recognize it. And it was kind of fun.
Yeah, it's fun. I mean, it's intentional and fun. I always wonder if you guys do that on purpose. So Amy, what about you? Did you leave some stuff in there thinking, I wonder if people are going to find this?
I do. And oftentimes it happens by accident, where, your subconscious is sort of just doing something on your behalf and then it shows up. But I like to leave little things in there, for friends that I grew up with, just because I write about home and I write about Appalachia. Just to give you an example, my best friend, Hannah, when we were in high school, she performed this play called The Last Chance Texaco, and we were like super into it. We were super like drama queens. And so the gas station in Shiner is called the Texaco. And after she read it, she texted me and said, "Was that for me?" And I said, "Yes, it was."
I love it. That's the greatest. So from Michael, I don't know if you saw this in the chat. Michael Walker. Thank you all for taking the time to do this. I love Amy Jo's book, and I'm looking forward to checking out Rich's. So that's great. Yes, Michael, you must read it.
Thanks for coming. Good to see you.
Yeah. So, was there anything that you all would like to say before we close up? Just to tell us, why don't we close on this one thing? Tell us what you're writing now. And then we'll close it at that. So Amy, what are you working on now?
I'm working on another novel. It's about a meteor strike. And it's about how the meteor strike happens in a place where a famous folk singer disappeared 35 years before. And it's about how her past starts to intertwine with the life of one of the young women who witnesses the meteor hit the ground. So hopefully that's what it's about. Still working on it.
Yeah, it's in the notebook stage. Yeah. Rich, what are you working on right now?
I want to read Amy Jo's book. That sounds great. I'm working on a sort of a sad novel. It's about a woman whose daughter is shot and killed by the police accidentally, and it started as a father-son story, and then this character came in, and so there's a lot of sad stuff going on there. But there's a similar idea that there's a male character and a female character. The male character is the son of a cop, and he's trying to understand how this could have happened. So it's also kind of a mess, but yeah, I'm working on it. We're getting there.
It's exciting.
So if anybody, we just put the link, someone asked if we have both books in stock. So if anybody wants to get the book from us, we'd love it. We just put the link on there that you can go to for our website. And I want to thank both of you so much. It was so great to meet you both and talk to you. I can't wait to see your work in the future. We'll stay in touch. We'll promote the book. We'll continue to promote the book and tag you as much as we can. And we love authors. And thank you so much for all this, for everything that you do.
Thank you all for being here too.
Yeah, thank you. It's a lot to give up a night for us or an hour.
Yeah,
So thanks
really
so much.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, Lauren.
Talk to you guys later. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.